Hello, good evening. Second video for today, which is great. Welcome to everybody who is new in the G&M Self-Healing Support Group. It's so wonderful to have such a wonderful growing group. It's grown by so many people. Every single day there are new people wanting to join, which is really exciting. Just to introduce ourselves, I'm Dr. Melissa Sell. This is my partner, Dr. Stephen Ravenstag, and we teach mindset strategies and ways of thinking about whatever it is that you have going on. Specifically, obviously, in the German New Medicine group, we're talking about healing, talking about your body, talking about the connection between your mind, how you're perceiving your world, what it's like to be you, and what impact that has on the cellular level, on whether your body is in a state of conflict activity or in a state of healing. And so we teach strategies for the mindset of healing so that you can get in the healing state and stay in the healing state and experience your body as healing instead of in conflict, which is when you have tissue adaptation, and that's what causes what most people think of as sickness. So if you're brand new to the group and you haven't seen G&M 101, I highly recommend watching that very soon, because that will help you to understand a lot of the context that we'll be talking about today, because we've been on a series of talking about beliefs. So you may have seen some of the power belief videos. And so if you're not really familiar with the concept of how your beliefs create your life, I recommend looking back at some of those videos. But just the kind of short story is what you believe about the world, about yourself, and about other people determines how you experience yourself, the world, and other people. And a lot of times these beliefs that we have, they are established over time, for the most part, by what we observe in our family situation, how we see other people, what they think it's really important to believe, what they think is true. We witness things happen in our lives and we say, okay, well, I believe I am this way, I believe people are this way, I believe this is true about the world. Hi, Sammy. And when you have a conflict shock, which in German New Medicine, the main thing that Dr. Hammer found out, like the iron rule of cancer and of all disease conditions, things we think of as sickness, they all start with a moment in time where you are caught off guard, where you're scared, where something happens you were not expecting. This is the Dirkhammer syndrome. This is the DHS. This is that moment in time where you're just going along your merry way and something happens and you weren't ready for it. And whatever that thing was in that moment, at that moment, your body got prepared for an attack. It got prepared because it was caught off guard. It was scared. And biologically, that means that it was preparing for a life or death situation. And in those moments, something happens on many different levels of you as a being, because you're not just the part of your mind that is watching this video and listening to this video. You're also your subconscious mind. You're also your body mind. You're also your brain. All of these different levels are working all at once. And so when something happens, it informs multiple levels of your experience, most of which you're not really aware of. You're not really aware of how deeply it is affecting you on a cellular level to have a conflict shock. But in those moments, we make decision beliefs. We make decisions about truths about ourselves, the world, and other people in those split-second moments when something catches us off guard. So whether it's a huge accident, whether it's someone saying something to you that you were just like, whoa, I was not expecting that. That really caught me off guard. If it's something happening to you, like a betrayal that you find out about and you're like, you were not prepared for that. In that moment, you made some decisions. You made some decisions about a way that you're going to see the world, because you never want this thing to happen to you ever again. And that's the same thing that happens when we have something like an allergy. The understanding of allergies in the German New Medicine perspective is that at that moment of shock, in that moment of the DHS, of the conflict, everything in your environment matters biologically, because it's like, okay, we don't want this to ever happen again. If it ever happens again, we want to be prepared ahead of time. And so that snapshot is taken of everything going on in your environment. So like the scents, the things that you're smelling, the food that you're eating, the time of year. There are so many, elements. Just think about all of the different elements that your body, your subconscious mind could say, okay, this is a cue for us that something bad might happen. We also do that with these beliefs. These beliefs are kind of cemented in that moment. And unless you have a huge I guess, revelation, unless you consciously start to evaluate these beliefs in your life, and if they're still serving you, you might actually be believing things that you're not aware of and that are running the show of your life in a way that's creating outcomes that you do not want. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is trying to become aware of these things that we're believing.
So
I know, stop talking all at once.
So the basic thing is this idea. So as far as I can tell, so my whole thing is like experience. My whole thing is finding ways of relating to what I call what it's like to be me, what it's like to be you, relating to that experience in ways that allow us to enrich the quality of what that experience is. So the value of that on the one hand is sort of self-evident, because, if the quality of what it's like to be you is good, that's a good thing. The better your life experience is, the better your life experience is. It's kind of like well-being, consciousness, enjoying what it is like to be you is in and of itself a worthwhile thing. It's an enriching thing. It's really kind of like the most important thing there is, because if you want to be healthy, why do you want to be healthy? Well, because it improves what it's like to be you. If you want money, why do you want money? It improves what it's like to be you. You can do other stuff, at least in theory. You want a relationship, you want to have kids, you want to make a contribution, you want to be significant, you want to be helpful, you want to be all the things that you want to be. You want to be because they, in the having of those things, the quality of your experience of what it's like to be you increases. Then from the German New Medicine perspective, as far as I can tell, the significant thing is that, your experience also matters for another reason. It's a direct, there's a direct relationship between the quality and the character of your experience and your physical health. And it's not the kind of like, stress is bad for you, stress wears you down kind of thing. It's realizing that your experience of what it's like to be you, say, so for example, shock, like in those moments when something happens and it pushes you over that emotional threshold. There's a certain amount of something that you can handle happening, and you kind of like maintain equanimity. Like something happens and it wasn't what you wanted, but you're just sort of like, oh, well, that wasn't what I expected, but all right, let's go. And then there's that thing that's like 10% more than that or 1% more than that pushes you over into freak out mode, where you lose your shit. That's a reality experientially. That's a thing that happens for people. You can handle as much as you can, and then beyond that, there's everything else. And that's that point at which you begin to sort of respond less than resourcefully, where you tend to resist emotionally. When you start saying, hang on a second, wait a minute, this is not okay, this is not all right, I can't accommodate this. At this point, we are in unfamiliar territory. Unfamiliar equals unpredictable. Unpredictable equals potentially unsafe. Potentially unsafe equals potentially life-threatening. So I've basically got the brakes on. Recognizing that experience, so to have an experience of what it's like to be you, is what it feels like or what it experiences like for you, for your nervous system, right? For your sensory data collecting, your eyes, your ears, and the information processing organ that is the brain, to be communicating to the body, hey, there's something going on in the environment. And so that's an interesting thing, that what it is like to be me in this moment in time is essentially the processing computer of my brain processing data that's coming in from my senses and communicating relevant aspects of that data to the tissues of my body, saying, hey, you know what, adrenals, you need to produce a little bit more of the adrenaline, and heart, you need to start beating faster so we can circulate that adrenaline so that the body can run fast to get away, or that the body can fight, or whatever. So recognizing it, just the quality of your experience, what it is like to be you is a communication. It feels one way for me to communicate to you, hey, Melissa, would you get some water when you got out of the room? It feels a different way to say, oh my God, there's a fire in here, right? I'm shouting and all this different stuff. When you're feeling shocked, the sensation of shock, or the sensation of betrayal, or the sensation of agitation, or of jealousy, or of resentment, or of danger, or of frustration, or whatever it is, that is a communication that's occurring. You experience it as a feeling. You experience it as an emotion. And it is a feeling. It is an emotion. But it's also something else. It's what it feels like for the sensory apparatus that is your brain and spinal cord to be transmitting, to be bringing information in from your environment, computing, kind of like processing that information and relaying that information to the body, to the organism as a whole, and saying, listen, we might need to start making more of this, we might need to build up a protective barrier, we might need to be adapting in this way, we might need to create a new lining here, we might need to do whatever. And so I think that just relating to your experience in that way, say, okay, what it's like to be me like right now? And then two, if that were a communication to my organism, if that were going to be eliciting some kind of an adaptive response from my body, what would that response be? And I think so. in these situations when, like, a shock happens or something like that, we're talking about decision beliefs today. This is when there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of create a belief. I think one way is kind of like the slow drip method, which is where, you're in an environment that triggers you to think certain things that don't really like freak you out or don't really even register consciously, but you think the same thing day after day after day. Like, for example, growing up, I heard a lot about how politicians were all sort of crooked. They were all kind of criminals. And I never had a traumatic experience that was like, I never personally was betrayed by a politician or anything like that, right? Or I didn't grow up, it wasn't during Watergate. I mean, I guess it was the whole Bill Clinton thing, but I thought that was pretty funny. It was like tee-hee-hee, it was 5th grade, it was hilarious. Like sex ed, when it coincided perfectly with Bill Clinton's, was that Picadillo? Is that term? But anyway, I didn't necessarily have a traumatic experience with a politician that led me to believe politicians were crooked. Or I just heard my dad say it every, a couple times a week or every so often. Oh, look, see, they're all crooked. You can't trust them. So that's one way to form a belief. Another way, though, and that's kind of like if you can imagine, like each little thought that you think or each idea that's kind of implanted in you or that you receive kind of like adds up over time. And eventually, you keep stacking, like if you keep stacking pieces of paper, you know this if you've ever bought a stack of paper before, each individual piece of paper is very thin. But if you took 200 or 300 of them and you pile them on top of each other, it's a pretty appreciable thing. It's a couple inches thick. It gets you up to that level, and I think it's the same thing with thought. When you layer on thought after thought after thought after thought, eventually there's a threshold that's reached there where the kind of the momentum of that genre or that flavor of thought becomes self-perpetuating. And at that point, you got a belief. There we go. I heard politicians were this way. I heard women were crazy. That was something I heard a lot growing up. And my dad never sat down and said, hey, women are crazy. It's so important. He didn't slap me around and say, it's important you believe this. I'm going to quiz you on this later, right? I didn't have a single experience with a really kind of psychotic woman that made me think, oh my God, all women are crazy. I just had it kind of drip fed to me here and there and there and there and there. And like over time, his voice sort of to become my voice, and it sort of became more and more convincing over time. And then I had interactions that I kind of selectively perceived as like, oh yeah, and it built up in that way before I was aware of it. There's another way, though, right? So we can build up to that threshold in kind of a stepwise way. People can do this to you, right? I mean, there's a couple different things that kind of result in divorces or the end of relationships or even just a fight. One is like, well, he didn't pick up his clothes, and then he was running a little late, and then he was looking at his phone when I was talking to him, and then he was, or, he cheated on you. Whoop, and it's right up there, right up to that threshold, and that's kind of the decision belief thing, right? That something overwhelming happens. A stimulus comes in, something so shocking or so threatening or so unpredicted or so, touched kind of like a nerve or something was sensitive to you, and it just skyrocketed you right beyond your emotional threshold. And in an instant, before you had a chance to even think about it, how you were going to relate to it or whatever, this thing led to there being decisions that you made about yourself, about the world, about other people. And that's like, for example, the thing that you said was this example of being cheated on, that like it leads you to believe certain things about men or about yourself. And like one of those things for me, one of the things that I used to come to the conclusion about was that like, I'm not the kind of person who can afford not to worry about this. So that's an interesting one. So that's kind of like almost like a decision about preparedness or about scanning. I better watch out for bad things that are going to happen to me. You come to those kind of conclusions. And a lot of the times they're pre-linguistic, which is to say, or they're non-linguistic. So it's not like you say to yourself, okay, Steve, listen, you got in a lot of trouble here because you were just having too much fun and feeling too good, so you better watch out for things that are going to... It's not quite like that, is it? Because it's a earlier part of the brain that says we need to be on our guard here. We need to be looking for signs and evidences and potentialities for things that we're worried about. And you can see how once you install that, it starts to inform everything about how you conduct yourself. And sort of the weird thing about it is that we start to behave in ways inadvertently. It's almost like if I think there's a danger in my environment, so if I think that you're going to say something nasty about me or you're going to talk behind my back or something like that, if I'm existing in an awareness of that for too long, that's kind of an exhausting place to be. Like, I mean, it's really hard to be prepared for something and to be. It's like that. It's like this whole thing with like soldiers and stuff. Like to get ready to. It's like the time leading up to the battle is like the most stressful time. And sometimes when the two sides are getting ready to fight, but like they're expecting the other side to attack, but they don't attack, and you wait and you wait and you wait. And psychologically, that is absolutely exhausting. It's so much more taxing even than just having to fight. A lot of these people, I mean, these like battles in which people's lives are in danger, and they were relieved when the actual violence happened because psychologically the stress of scanning and of waiting and saying, oh, is that it? Oh, that's not it. Oh, no, here it comes. That was so rough. And so if I have a belief that says we're friends, eventually you're going to, talk shit about me behind my back, or you're going to betray me, or you're going to steal from me, or you're going to cheat on me, or whatever, if I am living with that belief and I'm expecting that and I know it's coming, it actually is like a coping mechanism where I will create a perception. I'll create an experience of that thing being true after a certain amount of time because I can't handle the suspense anymore. I'll behave in ways that will evoke from you either the behavior that I'm looking for or create for myself an experience of it. And I think that's one of those things where you can see, you come to the decision, you adopt the belief for a reason that makes sense. Something happened and you're like, oh, we don't want that to happen again. But then when you're in that position of waiting for something, that thing's going to come along. If you are a victim, a persecutor is going to find you. That's just the way it works. And that's me for a long time, is that I was a victim of other people's stupidity. That was one of my things. I believed that it was my lot in life to be inconvenienced, to be put out, to be put upon by people's inconsiderateness or their stupidity or their unconscientiousness. I don't know if that's a word, but they were not conscientious, right? And that was my shtick, is that I went around, I was going, oh, see this guy, oh, he's parking over the line, and oh, see this person, they just did, oh, see, they don't, and look, and it was just on and on and on. And because I was that person, stuff happened to me like that all the time. And it wasn't until I realized that it was my believing of that was creating an experience, that was literally crafting a perception, that was resulting in behaviors and patterns of interaction, that was giving rise to that experience of what it was like to be me. Once I became aware of the fact that I was participating in that, I actually was the creative epicenter of that, then I was able to start changing it.
And this is so important when you are, so depending on where you are in your conflict biological program, if you say are still in conflict activity, if you're like, yeah, I still can't sleep at night, this still bothers me, I'm still in a conflict, that you becoming aware of what is the conflict made out of? What are you actively thinking about that's keeping this conflict active? Because it's your body preparing for fight. It's preparing for danger. It's doing everything that it can to get ready for an attack. And if you have resolved the conflict and you're like, okay, so I think I've resolved the conflict, but I want to make sure I've resolved the conflict, and I'm worried that maybe I haven't resolved the conflict, that's where shining the light of your conscious awareness into these beliefs and seeing what is operating behind the scenes. Am I predisposed to having another conflict of this type based on the way that I'm thinking, based on the things that I am currently believing? Because, and especially with, I think that a really great example, or a really good one to talk about, really great example of a conflict that can be ongoing, and it's very wearing, and it's very taxing, and it's not altogether, it may have started as a DHS, but it persists as just kind of a low-level undermining of yourself, which is a self-devaluation conflict. And so these self-devaluation conflicts, which affect what? Your lymphatic system, your bones, your muscles, depending on the severity of the conflict itself. It's decision beliefs, things that happen in that moment. So let's, an example of this, because this is something I relate to. I had a shocking moment in my life when I was, how old was I? 19. Where my boyfriend cheated on me, and it was something I witnessed with my own eyes. It was it was shocking. It was it was just the worst thing that I could have even imagined ever happening to me in my life at that stage, and it was just absolutely shocking. And so I know that was a DHS for me. I don't remember the physical symptoms, but I know that there were, the cascade of physical symptoms that came from that shock. But so you were kind of pushed over your threshold, right? You went to that point of where, that the kind of the rising experience, and then it gets to that point where it's like the experience is right here and it's under control, but then it's over your head, right? And then over, yeah. And so that was such a clear moment of a DHS, of a conflict shock. And then, I know that it was active. It was an active conflict for several days. I wasn't sleeping. I was reliving the moment in my mind. It was very vivid, very, and so that whole time, however, my body perceived that there were active tissue adaptations happening. And then, eventually, we resolved the conflict, whatever. And so that was no longer a conflict in and of itself, but the decisions I made in that moment about myself in relationship to another person, about the trustworthiness of another person, now that's a different story. Because, I did, and, it was really interesting because I was about to be in chiropractic school at that point. It was before chiropractic school, but I was getting adjusted a lot because I would have neck and back pain and soreness, and I didn't realize that there was a connection between my self-devaluation and muscular pain. But there's a connection between self-devaluation and muscular pain. If you are devaluing yourself, if you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, people are always going to cheat on me, I must not be pretty enough, I must not be whatever, or he's bad, or like getting suspicious about, okay, so this bad thing happened. So like what it did was it just put that on my radar. Like I had made beliefs in that moment. I decided that it's safer to believe, all of these things. But when I became aware several years later, wow, you know what? I consider myself as having trust issues. I've got trust issues, and it was all because there was a moment in time where I made these decisions that it's safer to have trust issues than to be caught off guard by, it's better for me to look at your cell phone and check your text messages than it is for me to be surprised by...
I was not the one, by the way.
It wasn't Steve. You know what I mean? So, but you can see, I just want to illustrate for you guys how these decision beliefs, how these things that happen in a moment can then go on to conduct an entire life experience out of something that, do I want that to be true? And that's, one of the things that we teach is that beliefs are tools. Beliefs aren't just what's true about the world. Many of us think that they're the same thing, but part of the thought technology, part of the thing that we help people to see is the fact that what you believe, beliefs are tools, and you can craft a life experience in a way that you prefer based on changing what you believe. And so once I became aware that me believing that it's inevitable that someone's going to cheat on me, or it's possible, or, it happened that one time, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe there's something wrong with me, maybe guys are just, this way, or maybe it's that girl, or, you know what I mean? Maybe, like all of those things though, having those active in my mind, having those beliefs, they're kind of behind the scenes, because I don't think about the fact that I believe it. I just do. You know what I mean? It's like you've got these lenses on, and you see through them, and it colors, and it changes the shape of the things that you see and the things that you're perceiving. And a big part of it, and that's the same thing like I mentioned before with allergies. It's a defense mechanism. It's my body says, okay, well, that was really, really bad that when that happened. We want to be ready because. And your body experiences it as a life or death situation, as like, it doesn't see that it's not a life or death situation. That's all it experiences. It's got on and off switch. Either we're good, everything's good, we're at ease, everything's okay, or we're not okay, we're in danger, let's adapt, let's get ready for whatever fight or flight situation we need to be in.
So so this thing happened, and there's this conflict, right? And the specificity of, and I don't know what that would be if you catch someone sort of cheating on you. That could be a couple of different things, right? Could be territorial, could be self-evaluation, could be, depending on you.
Yeah, it could have affected like the cervix or something like that for... sexual kind of conflict,
Just depending on how you, and then different people will perceive it in different ways. So, for example, a person who maybe their partner is more about ownership, or it's more about a territory thing, that would be maybe a territorial, right?
Yes.
And someone for whom the act of sex is a primarily procreative thing, or then that person might experience something to do with like the cervix or something, right? But the interesting thing is, so you have the conflict. Now, what's the conflict actually made of? It's not because it's possible for a person to know about or to discover that someone is cheating on them and not necessarily have a conflict, right? So it's not, this is so often is the case, this is very interesting, is that it's not the thing, right? It's the experience of it. And I think the primary characteristic of when something like that happens, something bad happens like that, to the degree that it's unexpected, that it's unanticipated, like a death, for example. I mean, if it doesn't matter if it's your loved one, or if it's even a child. I think if you lose a child and you kind of have an idea it's going to happen, it's not that it's better, but it's that the experience is kind of different than if like your child goes off to school one day and simply doesn't come home. You know what I'm saying? Like there's an element of experience there, of shock or of unanticipatedness. I think that pushes us over the threshold in a different way. And I think that psychologically, biologically, physiologically, I think that the body we are averse to unpleasant surprises. We are I mean, that's a disappointment, right? That's like an existential disappointment. You thought that that you were going to be with this person for the rest of your life, or you thought you had many more years together, or you thought that you were going to see your child grow up, and you experience this existential disappointment of being deprived of that which you were not. I mean, I could have never prepared for this. That there's a piece of me missing that I never even contemplated existing without, and like. The organism does not want you to have that experience, because that's a no go, that's a bad zone to be in. And so there's the conflict, and then you said you resolved the conflict over a period of days. You were shocked. So there's the fact that you were cheated on, right? There's the fact that this guy wasn't really doing something you wanted to do, doing something you didn't want him to do. But then there was the fact that you didn't suspect this was going on, right? This was a complete. Like, the context of this was you could not have been more surprised, right? Yeah. And the shock aspect of it really is what kind of triggers the conflict.
Yes.
Then as the conflict resolves, it's interesting. You kind of, as an organism, right, you adopted this decision belief and all this stuff that said, I mean, it wasn't a pleasant life experience to go around believing that you weren't good enough or that guys were just inherently untrustworthy or whatever. That wasn't pleasant. But what it did was protect you from that shock. You see what I'm saying? Because if it were to happen again, you'd say, "Oh, see, I knew it." And "Oh, see, I knew it." You might get angry and you might, take him to task or whatever. But it's not that kind of what I kind of call it is like an existential betrayal, when you think that everything's great and then reality deceives you. Do you know what I'm saying? When like you think that like things are cool and they love you, and then you find out that they don't, or you think that you're healthy, that they're healthy, and it's like reality plays a trick on you. And I think that the avoidance of that, in an effort to avoid that, will cause the other than conscious aspects of ourselves to set up all sorts of beliefs that don't really serve what it's like to be us. It's like a protective mechanism. It's like it surrounds you almost in this kind of like scab or this protective armor of unresourceful belief. And it's really heavy, and maybe it's really hot, and it's uncomfortable, and you can't move around. You can't relate to people the way that you want to, because you've got all these beliefs layered over the top of you. No one can see them, but they're there. They interfere with your ability to not only experience positive emotions like love and enjoyment and just excitement, but they don't just protect you from negative emotions. They also insulate you from really positive ones too, and they lead you to behave in ways that don't make sense, right? Because you're not necessarily, and this is the case for me for a long time, you're not behaving in a way that is a reflection of the person you're interacting with now. You're behaving in a way that's a reflection of decisions that you came to as a result of a shock or a conflict that you experienced way in your past. So you had the conflict, and then your body's like, whoa, shit, we weren't prepared for that. That could have killed us, right? That was something bad happened to us that we didn't think was possible, that we didn't anticipate. That's a problem, because unanticipated disappointment, you never know when it's going to be life-threatening. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You just
biologically, yeah. Especially, that's the thing to always remember with all of these. It's like, you've got to think about like primitive times. You've got to think about like when truly any kind of threat is a threat to your life or a threat to your offspring, or it's a life or death situation. And so keeping that in mind is so important when you're thinking about when you're experiencing life issues that are not an immediate physical danger, actual threat to your life.
And what happened though as a result of the shock aspect? I bet your heart rate went up. I bet epinephrine, right, is coursing through your body. I bet that you were ready to fight or run away, right? It was one of those things. Perhaps
I did fight.
She did fight. And so now, what would the difference have been if you would have discovered, I don't know, a murderer who was coming after you, or something like that, or a wild animal, right, that was going to come and get you? It would have been the same. Heart rate would have gone up. Catecholamine, stress hormones would have started being produced. And so it's not at all silly to say that, the body's like, oh, we were unprepared. Let's be ready for this next time, so that when you find that thing, kind of like what to do. And I think that's where all of these beliefs come from. That's where all this unresourceful stuff comes from, is that there's the you that you experience yourself to be, kind of like the narrow beam of consciousness. My name's Steve. we live in North Carolina right now. It's like, oh, I'm a guy. I have an internet business. And then there's you, and you do the things that you do. But then there's also this ancient organism. You've been around the block a couple of times, in terms of like your genetic material. And from the perspective of that aspect of yourself, the kind of like ancient brain stuff, it's like a big fucking problem. If bad things happen that you weren't ready for, that's like a non-negotiable. It's like, I don't know, for the CIA or the Marines or something to get caught not being ready for something, it's like really embarrassing, and they're like, no, we got to fix this thing. That's what our brain says when something bad happens and we weren't ready for it. If it pushes us over that threshold, we need to do anything and everything we can do to be ready for bad shit to happen again, because we don't want to get caught off guard. You know what I mean? Because like, thriving or being happy or enjoying what it's like to be you isn't necessary for your survival, but being prepared is necessary for your survival. And so sometimes that part is willing to sacrifice your experience to a degree that is not really necessary, that doesn't really help us here. And so I think the thing is kind of recognizing like what adaptations you were making, you know what I'm saying, for that whole thing, and then finding out if there's like an opportunity cost to that, right? Is it costing something for that? Is it worth it? You know what I mean? Protecting myself from that kind of a disappointment, like, and is there another way to do it? You see what I'm saying? Is there like a way? Is there a more resourceful way to prepare myself for the fact that sometimes things, which is like what all of our beliefs are about. I think like the belief course is about, like this ability just to respond resourcefully to whatever happens. That's been such a huge freedom thing for me, because I've had bad things happen to me in the past. I've had relationships that have failed. I've had disappointments. I've had sort of like personal betrayals, all this different stuff. And, if I had a negative belief about women, a negative belief about friends, a negative belief about money, a negative belief about everybody, to kind of accommodate all those things so I'd be ready for them next time they happen, I wouldn't be able to have any good relationships, because I'd believe so many unresourceful things about so many different aspects of life, and I did for a long time. If you have a resourceful kind of catch-all belief, though, so for example, the important thing, my only job, is just to respond resourcefully to whatever happens in my life. That's my only job. So when that stuff happens, when things come up, when you practice this long enough, what happens is it doesn't matter what happens, you remember. As soon as that thing happens, you might get within a millimeter of your threshold, but then you say, oh no, wait a minute, hang on. It's actually okay that this happened, right? My job is not to do the impossible and go back in time and prevent this thing from having occurred. My only job is to respond resourcefully to the fact that this thing has indeed happened. And the freedom in that, one, is that you can respond resourcefully to whatever happens, and to the degree that you do that, you can kind of discover and germinate and benefit from the seed of greater benefit that exists in all adversity. The other thing, though, is that you free yourself from the compulsion of living in the shadow of all the bad things that might happen. You cease to attract to yourself bad things because you spend so much time scanning for them and looking for them and bracing for them and preparing for them just in case they might happen, not realizing that that is literally attracting and drawing all those things into your experience. You just know you'll respond resourcefully to anything that happens, no matter how good or bad or expected or unexpected it is. That's useful because it makes you resilient, but it really is useful because most of the bad shit that we worry about happening never happens. But we expend tremendous amounts of psychic and emotional energy worrying about the possibility that they will. And so it's like, okay, it's cool to be ready to respond when something bad does happen or something unanticipated or whatever, but it's really wonderful. The life that I build with the time, with the energy, with the emotion, with the, all of that stuff that I'm not expending, worrying about, oh my God, what about this and what about this? I don't worry about Melissa cheating on me because, one, we just don't really have that kind of relationship. But the reason we don't have that kind of relationship is because if that happened, what would I do? Well, I would respond resourcefully to it. I would probably feel some negative emotion. I'd probably let that be okay. I'd probably say, look, this is kind of like not a good thing for me. This is not a good thing for us. What are we going to do about this moving forward? How are we going to split up our business stuff? How are we going to make... I would just respond resourcefully to it. Like, that's what would happen. And then I would go on and I would be fine. And like, when you have the ability to know that, like, your experience is going to get better, even when you don't feel it getting better yet, it becomes safe for you to live and to have kind of the audacity to live happily right here in the now moment. Of course, the benefit of that is what? Because I'm not really worried about you cheating on me, and you're not worried about you're not worried about me cheating on you. Neither of us bring negative energy into the relationship that predispose the other to do that kind of a thing. And so you can see here, beliefs are now creating reality. Because I believe that I could be fine without you, it becomes safe for me to be very happy, unreservedly happy with you. And I think that's an important thing to notice, is that, like, in order for you to really love and enjoy the people and the situations and the stuff and the circumstances of this life, which is temporal, which is transient, which is always changing, you have to kind of cultivate within yourself consciously cultivate the knowledge that you'll be fine no matter what happens, that you can respond resourcefully to anything. And until you do that, you can't fully enjoy all the wonderful things that you have. You know what I'm saying? You can't really fully allow yourself to be kind of recklessly in love with life until you know that there's not any one element of it that has to be some way. It's this whole thing of preferences versus prerequisites. Preferences enrich your life experience. I prefer to have lots of money. I prefer to have happy clients. I prefer for Melissa to be happy with me. I prefer for my dog to be happy with me. I prefer to be well fed and have enough rest and to have done my exercises. But they aren't prerequisites for me, which is to say I don't use the absence of any or all of those things as an excuse to resist and to create suffering in my life or to do that which doesn't serve me. I mean, sometimes I actually do, but I try not to. To the degree that those are preferences, I can really enjoy those things. Like if I need you to feel a certain way about me, or even want to be with me, if I literally have to have that, or if I convince myself I have to have that, I can't allow you to just choose to do that because it's what you really most want to do. And if I can't allow you to do that, I'm oppressing you. I'm kind of curtailing your freedom because I've curtailed my freedom by not really tapping into the full power kind of what I have. And I think that to the degree that you start to realize your capacity, to respond resourcefully to anything, you do a nice thing of kind of deconstructing all of these adaptations that we can make in response to these decision beliefs. It's almost like, we built up this wall or this minefield to protect us from scary things that could happen. But we realize now that that's costing us a lot. It's a lot to upkeep. It's preventing nice friends from coming in. It's preventing a lot of good things from happening to us. Look, these people over here, they want to bring us money and they want to bring us in, but we've got this minefield. This person wants to come over here and give us a hug, but I've got a minefield and machine guns pointing out perceptually with my beliefs that are protecting me because when I was, 15, something bad happened. It's like, maybe it's not worth it anymore. Maybe what I can do is kind of train myself almost to have kind of like judo, so it's like, hey, I can give you a hug, and if you're certain that you got a knife, you're trying to hurt me or something like that, I can just disarm you, right? I can just respond resourcefully to that. And that's a cool place to be.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, and it's like, when you hear a lot of these things and you think about how you can relate that to something going on in your life, if you are in a conflict, or if you are continually, or you're scared about changes in your body, and a big shock is a diagnosis shock, and so in that moment when you receive a diagnosis, I mean, that for most people is that's more shocking than anything, is the fact that they have received this terrifying diagnosis. And then in that moment, decision beliefs are made. I can't trust my body. I thought I was doing fine. I feel perfectly healthy. Has my body betrayed me? Am I, weak? I didn't think that this could happen to me. And then all of these things that get implanted, all of these beliefs that you start believing about yourself. And then you also start thinking about and believing about metastasis and cancer moving to different areas of your body and your lymph nodes. And so you're constantly checking and touch, and then you find, oh my goodness, there actually is something there. And you don't know the connections going on in the body, and the fact that self-devaluation in the moment of that conflict and all the fear that came along with it, and all of the, the what ifs and all of the doubts about your body, all of that happened in that moment, that is a creative part of your life experience. And so if you don't start to become aware of those things, they can perpetuate in your experience. And one of the big things I find with a lot of the people that I work with is that we are so fixated on what the body is doing. It's almost like we are just watching and touching and checking and we want constant confirmation that everything's working out right, but we've got so much attention, focused attention and worry and fear about what's going on in our bodies, when any kind of tension and worry and fear, that's not conducive to your body healing. It actually has to come from relaxation and ease and feeling good. And so that's why it becomes so important to start analyzing and looking at and shifting these beliefs, because if you don't, your body will continue to adapt. And that's why it's interesting. It's like, well, this thing happened, and so it makes sense, and so I'm justified. And you are totally justified in the decision beliefs that I made in that moment after that bad thing happened to me. I was totally justified in it, and no one can come along and say, oh, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, of course not. Who's got any right to tell anyone about their experience? But when I start to realize that for my benefit, for my health, for my creating a life experience that I enjoy, finding a different way is going to be extremely beneficial to me. And I think about there's this family on Instagram that I came across earlier this past week, and just the most heartbreaking, shocking story. A little 3-year-old boy, they were getting the family, it was going to be his birthday, and so they were unpacking some party favors or something for the birthday party, and the 3-year-old boy choked on a bouncy ball. And, the mom's pregnant, and they've got, I guess it was 3 kids, and so she's pregnant with another child, and this 3-year-old boy, I mean, she did everything that she could to get this bouncy ball out of his throat, and he died in her arms. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what a shocking. And see, that's the thing, is these things that happen to us in our life, I mean, how could you ever prepare for something like that? And just that, that mother, her awareness of how that shock is impacting her physical body, and the decisions that she could potentially make about herself in that moment. I'm a bad mother, being scared about your kids ever having toys ever. I mean, all of those things are totally understandable. But for her to know the connection between, those fears and those active beliefs and what's going on in her body and moving forward, I mean, it's very complex, and it's very, it's her life experience, and no one can say, oh, hey, you need to stop believing that. But it's, at some point, looking at the things that you're believing about these things that happen to you at a moment in time, and if those beliefs are serving and creating a sense of ease and peace and, well-being in your body, or if you are continually triggered to get back into conflict activity based on these beliefs that are running the show of your life. And so that's why just having access to different ways of thinking about it, I mean, that's what it is. There are no rules for this life experience. There are no rules. I mean, who can tell you this is how this is what you need to do, how you need to respond when this bad thing happens or that bad thing. I mean, we're all kind of playing it by ear here. And so just having access to ways of thinking and ways of, processing what happened to you in your life, these traumas, is really such a powerful thing to have access to. And a lot of people, we just, we're just doing the best we can, and we're just kind of coping. And that's what most people end up doing, is they're just coping in some way. And unfortunately, that coping a lot of times doesn't get at these root cause beliefs. And those root cause beliefs are still there. And so you're still being triggered by your environment to go back into conflict activity, which then what happens? Many times you've got more symptoms going on in your body. You think something even worse is going on. And that's why this work is so powerful. That's why knowing GNM and having a model for understanding how your mind works and how you can shift things around and adopt new perspectives and adopt new beliefs that's true prevention. That's preventing you from having a negative life experience, and then also preventing you from having adaptations and changing and and healing symptoms in your body continually. And that's there's nothing more important than just having a way to process all of the stuff that goes on in these lives that we're just kind of, trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, so Lisa said, here we are, I can be safe without you. In terms of that's a very useful belief. And in fact, I think even more than that, it's very unsafe to be under the illusion that your safety depends upon any other person being around, And there's a certain number of times that you just kind of think that you just say, there's actually nothing in particular that I need to have happen, or that must not happen in order for me to be okay. My whole thing, my fate, my destiny in this life is determined by the degree to which I allow myself to respond resourcefully to what is, to not resist the fact that what is what is at a given moment in time. And that's such a freeing thing. It's a liberating thing. It feels almost like, I don't know, it's almost like being freed of, it's just like you've never been naked in your whole life. You've never been free of kind of the fetters of conventional thought, of conventional experience, of conventional just assumptions about where your experience comes from and what it follows. It's weird. It's a weird thing to look at a present situation and to just have the temerity to experience it in a new way. Because you get these skills, and it's like, oh, this stuff's pretty cool. This works. I can shift my experience. Oh, and you've done some kind of tentative excursions into feeling confident when you would have normally felt worried, or not resisting when you would have normally resisted and suffered. But you get the swagger after a while, and you start to realize that it's not being younger or being richer or being fitter or being prettier or being smarter or being anything than you are right now. It's a willingness to respond to your situation. It's a willingness to respond to your internal experience, to your external reality, to your situation, to your circumstances, to look at it and say, okay, given this, what do I want? And to repeat that pattern, repeat that incantation, repeat that spell over and over and over and over again until the answers to it begin to take permanent shape in your experience and in your reality. That's all it is. It's not like you're a member of some other group or something like that, and you need to change, or like it's contingent upon something in that regard. It really is a willingness to respond resourcefully to what is true to you, for you, right now. You don't need things to be, you don't need what's true to be other than it is. You just need to be willing to respond resourcefully to what is true, to acknowledge it, to be aware of it, to be aware of where it's coming from, and to have, I mean, this is like your one, you kind of have to have faith in it. You have to have faith in it, though, to use it. You have to have faith in it to be willing to look at everything about your present reality and say, okay, given this, what do I want? To accept it. That's that thing, is to it, because we almost think that if we resist it, or if we hold ourselves in opposition to it, it's not really fully true. It's like it's 99% true, it makes us sad, it oppresses us, it's there all the time, but we haven't signed on to it because we're emotionally resisting it. And we think that almost keeps a distance between us and harsh reality. But the reality is that when you add that 1% in, that acceptance, okay, I'll work with this. I'll work with this. My relationship's not what I thought it was going to be. My experience isn't what I really want it to be. I'm not feeling the way I want to be feeling. My life is not the way I want it to be. I'm going to acknowledge that to myself. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to say, I'm willing to work with this. Okay, given this what is wanted. That's all acceptance is. I mean, acceptance is, if you think about like an artist, someone who's going to like do pottery, in order to make a beautiful pot or a beautiful plate or a vase or whatever it is you're going to do, you have to accept the fact that you've got a cube of unformed clay there. Putting your hands in it and shaping it into what you want it to be is accepting the fact that it isn't in this moment in time what you want it to be. I think it's the same thing with reality. It's like having it's audacity, it's temerity, it's nerve, it's gumption, it's courage to look at it and say, I'm going to respond resourcefully to this. I'm not going to resist it anymore. I'm going to work with this. I'll work with this. I'll work with what I have right here and right now, experientially, physically, in all of those different ways. It's a very brave thing, but it's a liberating thing. And it's like, what is it like? It's like, I don't know. You have those dreams where you're standing naked in front of a whole bunch of people, or you start singing in front of people when you've never done it before, or maybe public speaking, and it's like you go up on the stage and you're like, am I going to freak out? Am I going to embarrass myself, or am I going to do a good job? You kind of start doing kind of a good job, and then it's almost like nervous. Or like when you start riding a bike for the first time and you think you're going to fall over, but you're actually riding, and you're like, oh, holy shit, I think I know how to do this thing. But then after a while, it just becomes the way you do life. And once that becomes like your new normal, that is your new normal, and you find that your well-being really does flow from your willingness to respond resourcefully to what is. It doesn't flow from any specific details of what is happens to be. That like well-being flows from a willingness to engage with your creative process rather than separating yourself from it. It's like, it's not when someone cheats on you or breaks up with you or steals from you or does you wrong. That's not what causes you harm. It's when you say, no, I'm not willing to have this be a part of my creative process. No, I reject this aspect of the experience that I have created and am creating. No, I'm not willing to work with this reality. I'm not willing to evoke from this what is, what can be. I'm not willing to look at this and say, okay, given this what is wanted. I mean, it's not that it's not understandable that you wouldn't do that. It's that it hurts you to not do that. That's all it is. And you can do what hurts you. I mean, that's part of kind of your autonomy, as a conscious creator. But when you recognize that it's not what is that's hurting me, it's my unwillingness to respond resourcefully to this what is, to acknowledge this thing and to say, okay, I'll work with you. It is a rejection, right? This is you're a part of reality. And when a part of reality holds itself in fundamental opposition to the rest of itself, there is estrangement there. This is what it is to be of split mind. I mean, you are losing your power. You're cutting yourself off from your power. It's like you're estranging yourself from yourself, or you're rejecting a part of yourself. When reality rejects itself, it feels like it's less than it is, because it is less than it is, because it's holding itself in opposition. But when you say, okay, given this what is wanted, what do I want to do with this? There's an intimacy there. I mean, there's a real intimacy with what you don't want and with what you do want, and you recognize that acceptance is kind of like the magic dust that turns what you don't want into what you do want, and that there's this big creative process involving all three of those things, you and what you want and what you don't want. There's this wonderful dance that occurs between those things that's called conscious creation, that is better than any one of those things on their own. it's not like, I mean, there's a reason, that you're not starting out having everything that you want. It's because if you had everything that you wanted already, you wouldn't have the pleasure of creating it. You know what I mean? And when you recognize that, and like, if all you ever did was watch a movie that was kind of plain Jane, and it's like old Sam and Dave went to the movies and they had fun and they came home and Sam spilled some soda on his khakis, but other than that everything went fine, and and they didn't run out of gas, they didn't have a car accident, nobody got sick, nobody got hurt, no one ever faced a challenge. It's like if Lord of the Rings, for example, was like returning a DVD to Redbox. I mean, you just went and put the ring in the fire and everything was fine. There had to be some shit that happened to make it interesting. And when you recognize that this life is kind of like that way, and like it's fun to watch people be in Mirkwood in a movie, but if you're actually in Mirkwood, it's fucking terrifying. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of part of it, though. And when you recognize that, you just look at it and say, okay, given this, what do I want? You get with this thing. You stop kind of obstructing it. You stop trying to resist it. You sort of become an active part of it. And that feels good. No matter what your process happens to be right now, there's a freedom and an exhilaration to that.
Yeah, I think that when you refuse to engage with it, when you are so resistant to the diagnosis, the loss, the trauma, whatever that thing is for you, I mean, that's when people go into a depression where they just they can't accept it, and they're not willing to work with it. But then the people who either come out of the depression, they say, all right, I'm ready to work with this. I'm ready to to just accept what is going on and work with it to create something that I want. And that's why we call people brave, and that's why we love that when the worst things happen to them, but somehow they found something within them. They found a spark. They found they had such a desire for life that they made something happen out of something that was just absolute tragedy. And so we love watching that. We love to see that. And then to realize that we all have that opportunity. Maybe your tragedy wasn't as bad as their tragedy, but whatever it is for you, your willingness to work with it, your willingness to look at, what did I decide about myself in that moment? What is still active? What am I still thinking about myself because of this thing that happened to me? Am I thinking that my body is broken, that it can't heal, that I'm not a good mother, I'm not a good wife, I'm not a good woman, whatever, if you had that moment and told yourself these stories, what is that still active in your experience? And are you seeing new beliefs that you're like, I want to believe GNM, I want to believe that this is actually a healing process in my body, I want to believe that my body's doing exactly what it needs to do, but I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time trusting myself. I'm having a hard time letting go of these walls, of these barriers, of these things that I'm holding because I do feel like they're keeping me safe, to be constantly worried about this or that, or worried about how what my body is doing, being worried about what's going on with my relationships. Or am I ready to look at these things and say, what do I want to believe instead? I realize that beliefs are creative, and that I believe what I believe because of things that have happened to me in the past, but I'm ready to take a look at what I believe. I'm ready to take a look and see what is it that's running the behind the scenes show and creating this life experience for me. And you know what? I'm ready to retire the ones, fire the ones that aren't working, and start adopting some new beliefs, start believing things that are going to create for me an experience that I actually enjoy. And that's really, that's what this kind of whole belief series that we've been on, and the 10 power beliefs and the Beyond Belief mini course is designed to do, is to help it to get it to actually stick to your mind, instead of just like, oh yeah, I believe my body is healing, but you're having, you have one of those thoughts per day, and then you're having 99 thoughts of my body's not healing, what is this wrong, I bet this is something wrong. And so getting a strategic method for getting these new beliefs to stick to your mind, so that those are truly what you believe deep down. They're not just surface beliefs anymore, or good ideas. They're like what you truly believe, how you truly see the world now. And that's really such an important component of healing, is looking at what you believe.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a willingness to figure out how do you do, because believing something virtually no one does on purpose. Believing something that happens sort of by accident. Believing is kind of a phenomenon that kind of just, we're capable of doing it, but we don't necessarily know how we do it. And so that's what this course really, the thing was, is that I sort of looked at how I came to believe the best and worst things that I believed over the course of my life. How did that happen? And I was like, I'm trying to remember, and in working with other people, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and actually shifting. So what I like to do sometimes is talk to a person, not ask them directly, like, what do you still believe all that old crap that you used to believe about yourself, but to actually ask them questions that in the answering of them, they'll give me an idea, right? They'll give me maybe a different answer than they did when we first started working together. And I found that there were certain things, there were certain approaches that allowed people to go in a stepwise way, you know what I'm saying, in the direction they wanted to go. Like if I want to move like across the room and I try to take a step that's larger than what I'm capable of taking, I'll probably fall over. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna impede my progress. On the other hand, if I take little tiny steps that are smaller, it's gonna take me longer than it needs to. There's a certain stride, you know what I'm saying, that's optimal for getting me from where I am to where I want to go. And I found that there's a certain stride of thinking, of reaching, of kind of like psychic push that will get you from believing what you do to believing really what you want to do. And I mean, if you can do it by accident, you can do it on purpose. It's just a matter of figuring out how to make that happen. You know what I'm saying? If you can write an article, or if you can compose a song, or out of inspiration, I mean, you can engineer inspiration. Why not? I mean, anything that can happen naturally can be encouraged to happen, or can be engineered, it can be facilitated to be done kind of on command or at will. And that's kind of what this course is all about. Is it's like, actually, instead of just talking about changing beliefs, what, like right here and right now, in this moment, if you're going to, because there's something you can do right here and right now to start believing something other than you do. It's got to be, right? Even if we don't know what it is, we know that there is something that you can do. And this course is really all about moving you in the direction of figuring out exactly what that thing is. When you start asking yourself, okay, I want to believe this thing. Do I believe this thing? No. I believe it maybe like 13%. You know what I'm saying? I partly believe it's possible, but I don't believe it's absolutely true. There's a thought you can think right now that will maximize the probability that you will arrive at believing whatever that thing is as soon as you possibly can. And when you believe that thing, and when you consciously adopt it, you know that your perception is different. You know that your experience is different. You know your patterns of behavior are different. Not just what you do and how you, but how you go about doing stuff. Everything about the nature and the energy behind the things that you do, the communication that you send to other people is different. It's different when you just, okay, if I wake up and I say people are great and money comes from rendering value and blah, 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 and I say all this cool stuff, it's good. That's one thing, but if I'm carrying around a whole bunch of crap from my childhood about people and value and money and all this stuff, I'm communicating that stuff more than I'm communicating my morning affirmations. I need to penetrate the bedrock of my belief, you know what I'm saying, and get down there to the old stuff and recode that. You know what I'm saying? I need to stop playing around with installing new apps on my crappy computer, and I need to kind of defrag the computer. I need to do a complete wipe of the hard drive and put some new stuff on. And that's really what this course is designed to do. It's designed to actually create an experiential shift within you, so that you don't believe that everything's possible. You just believe that everything's pretty much possible. I mean, that's when I get up in the morning, it's like, I just, I didn't until I did. Do you know what I'm saying? And I went to seminars and people yelled and screamed and they made us do a lot of exercise and all this. And I was like, look, I mean, I still don't believe it. I mean, I feel kind of like exhausted because of all this exercise you made me do, but I just don't believe this thing. I recognize that I didn't come to believe that things were impossible. I didn't come to believe that money was hard to make by going to boot camp where I had to run 17 miles while someone said money's hard to make, money's hard to make. I came to believe that money was hard to make because when I was playing video games in the living room, I heard my dad talking about to my stepmom how hard it was to make money, or things that just implied it, like, for example, money is scarce, or there's never enough, or blah, blah, all this different stuff. And so if I want to consciously believe new and wonderful things, I probably need to do it in a similar way. I probably need to arrange for thoughts that are consistent with what I want to be believing now to kind of ping on my psychic radar in that same kind of like no big deal, nonchalant, not overt, just kind of implied, indirect kind of way. Because when I was over there playing video games when I was 8 years old and I was hearing my parents argue about money or stress about money or whatever, I was so engrossed in what I was doing here that I didn't consciously or intellectually evaluate what I heard coming in. And I didn't say, ooh, do you want that informing what you create and behave for the rest of your life? I didn't, because I was just doing my thing. And so what if we could integrate kind of like changing beliefs into your life in the same way right now? What if when you're at your computer at work, something were to remind you of something that you're wanting to believe, and you're so busy doing what you're doing that you just, and people, it's really funny because like the techniques in this course, sometimes people say, oh, well, I don't really have time to do that throughout the day. And of course, that's not true. You do have time to do it. And the fact that you have just enough time to do it, but not enough time to think about it too much, that's part of why it works so well. Because if you're on the phone with the client and, it's time to do your little exercise that takes like 2 seconds, you don't have time to marshal or rally the negative, unresourceful, limiting beliefs that you're carrying around to object to the thing that we're putting on your psychic radar. You just have to look at it and go. And, it doesn't matter if it's just for a second, because you're going to come back to it again later. You're going to do this stuff again later. That's exactly, it's like drip feeding you good stuff instead of drip feeding you poison. It's like so much of life and so much of our home life and so much of just growing up. It was like just little erosions. You know what I'm saying? Just little, you might not be good enough. You might not be able to accomplish it. Well, so-and-so was really smart too, and they didn't make it. Da, 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 da. And, you kind of like, after a while, it gets to a certain threshold where it's like, I'm now mentally ill. I'm experientially ill. I am impaired now because there's a certain amount of kind of toxic crap in my system. And what I need to do is start putting some really good stuff in there too, in that same kind of way. Now, if you try to, put too much in at one time, if you've been starved before, and we try to shove, into your system 10 really resourceful beliefs, what's going to happen? You're going to barf them all back up psychically, right? Your body's going to say, whoa, we can't handle this stuff. This is too much fiber. It's like people who've never eaten a salad in their life, and all of a sudden they go on a salad cleanse or whatever, and they have terrible digestive upset. It's like, well, look, your body's not ready for that because you haven't eaten nothing but Snickers bars for the last 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you should edge into it a little bit. Same thing is true with this believing new things. It's that same kind of a way. Eat a cucumber. That's how I started. I never ate salads until I was in college, and I could stand the taste of a cucumber. And I said, okay, every meal I'm going to slice up a cucumber and I'm going to eat that. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. And now we eat kale salads every day, right? Mm-hmm. I said, I can believe this. I can believe this nice thing. I can remind myself of this. This belief feels good to think about. I can't believe all this other shit. That's too much. I'll come back to that later. Everyone's always doing the best they can. Maybe later. You know what I'm saying? But I can believe everything's always happening like it's supposed to in a general sense, right? I can palate that now. Let me do that over and over and over again. Let me press the 36-pound weight, kettlebell, and I did that for long enough, and then I went up to the 54, and then I pressed the 54, and then I could press the 72. It's just like, respond resourcefully to where you are right now. Do what you can, and the amount that you can do will kind of increase, And if you try to press the 74 right away, you try to eat the salad right away, you try to love that guy, that girl right away, you're going to kind of blow out the system, right? And it's going to say, no, not going to work. But if you just do it a little incrementally, then you'll be amazed at the things to which your brain will respond to. And every time your brain adapts resourcefully, every time it tries to adapt to a manageable stimulus and it succeeds, that's a little dopamine. It likes that. That's a success. That's good. And it says, oh, give me another one. Give me another one. It's a little bit more challenging. And you just amp it up a little bit. You try to think that thought. You expose yourself to that belief. Your brain loves to win. That's why people get so addicted to video games. It's like if you make these video games winnable, a challenge, but winnable, you absolutely just get, it's like making money. You get rewarded. You're getting these points. Your brain loves that stuff, and you can use that to do anything. You can use it to build an actual real life that you really love if you build the systems that allow yourself to kind of leverage the hardware you're working with. So.
That's why I really love, like this course and all the courses that we create, because they really do, it's kind of like an organic approach to you doing it yourself. So whether you're using it individually for yourself, whether you are, a coach or practitioner, you're trying to help other people. I think a lot of people, especially in like the holistic alternative healing world, they're really into like, oh, this or that method, or this kind of hypnosis, or this kind of, whatever so-and-so healing method, where you do this kind of one-time thing and it fixes everything. And I think some people do have great results with that because they believe that it's going to work. They've read testimonials from other people. They're ready for it to work. And I think that's wonderful. But then there's also, a way that you can do this yourself, where you don't necessarily need someone to hypnotize you and erase all of your, your underground negative beliefs, that you can reprogram yourself. It's kind of like a DIY approach. It's kind of becoming the master of your own experience instead of needing to like go to the master in order for the master to fix you, kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I really like, is because it really does put you in the driver's seat of your experience. And so you always, it makes you really autonomous. It makes you really able to realize that you can never be backed into a corner of your experience where you can't get out. And so it's kind of like come for advice, and I'll give you advice, or Steve will give you advice about how to do it, but it's always you doing it. It's always you are the one who is putting on this show, and you're the one who's learning how you're doing it. And so when you really, it's like it really builds your confidence, because you just know that there's nowhere that I can go that I can't get out of. There's no bad experience that I can create for myself that I don't know the anatomy of. I know the anatomy of this experience, and so instead of needing someone to fix it for you, you say, okay, so I'm having this experience, I'm aware of these components, is there something that I could be more aware of? And we help you with that, but you're the one who's doing it the whole time. And that's what I think is really great about the Beliefs course, the Ever Better Life course, is it really does, it gives you those tools. And so that's why a lot of people that take our courses become coaches or are coaches themselves, because they feel so equipped to help a person to make those connections, to see the unseen. And that's what this is all about. It's seeing the unseen. It's looking into the creative process that's creating everything about what it's like to be you, but doing it with awareness. You're doing it on purpose instead of just doing it by default like you're used to doing. So good stuff. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. So we've got one more day of the Beyond Belief course that's 33% off. So that'll be today and then all day tomorrow as well. So if you're interested in that course, definitely check it out, because it's really amazing. And Steve, I mean, he put this thing together, and it's like there's nothing else that exists that's really like this as far as deconstructing beliefs and understanding how to get a belief to stick to your mind. So yes, Rich, that's true empowerment. It's giving you the power, because you've got the power anyways. It's all about you. It's all about you, this creative process that you are running the show. And it's just when you are given, a map for understanding how to run the show in a way that you prefer, I mean, then you're unstoppable. There's truly nothing that you can't change. There's no perception, there's no experience that cannot be improved by you kind of plugging into all of your internal resources. And that's really the thing, is I want you to experience yourself as the star of the show. I want you to experience yourself as the one who's making this all happen. And when you start to see that and you really start to feel it and you believe it, you've got to believe that you're capable of it. And that's one of those beliefs that you can start to get to stick to you, is that you start believing in yourself and your abilities. So
yeah, if you can create an experience of disempowerment, what that means basically is you can create an experience. And if you can create an experience, it's just as easy to create an experience of empowerment. This is just to create one of a disempowerment. That's a funny thing. It's always been so funny to me, is that like there's paradox in all this stuff, and it's wonderful because it reveals how okay everything is. That like even the feeling or the experience of disempowerment is an iteration, is a manifestation, is an affirmation of power, because it's you creating an experience called I don't know how powerful I am. And that's a pretty neat thing. I mean, that's a nice thing to be able to do. It's a nice thing to learn how not to do anymore. And so yeah, that's fun. So even the sensation of disempowerment is evidence of how powerful you are, because it means that you can create experiences. And the fact that you can create one experience doesn't mean that you can't create others. In fact, it means that you can create others. You can create any one if the experiential apparatus is in place, which is to say, if there is something that it's like to be you, there's nothing that what it's like to be you can't be. That's such an important thing to recognize, is that I can't give you the ability to experience yourself as existing. I mean, if you can bring that to the table, we can help you out with the rest, right? How to create an experience that is really wonderful and is perpetually improving. So
yeah, Bonnie has a question here, and it's kind of a, how do you help someone with disabilities understand these tips and in the videos? And a big part of it, I mean, from my perspective, is like the desire of the individual, and how much desire is there in the individual, regardless of their ability. They may have disabilities, but do they desire a better experience?
And I think it would probably depend on what it is. If is it like an intellectual thing, or is it an intentional thing? Because in my experience, everyone without exception has within them an adult kind of ego state and an ability, whether it's been accessed for a really long time or whether or not it comes online too often. They do have the ability to relate to information. If it was a specific topic or something, maybe if there's something that stood out to you in this that you'd like to maybe be simplified, I think we could probably do that.
We are working on a video for you too. It should be ready very soon.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it does go down to being really simple. I think lots of examples, lots of things that tie into that person's experience That's because this stuff is kind of hard to relate to, simply because we don't really relate to it that often. We talk about experience that much. One thing is just simply talking about experience, like what is, what's it like to be you right now, or how are you doing? What don't you like, what do you like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, what's happening, what are you thinking? Asking those questions just kind of over and over again. And that's how I talk to children. I mean, I just talk to kids as if I just assume they know what I'm talking about. It's how I talk to clients too, who I know don't really understand kind of the vernacular of this system yet. The best way to teach it, it's like immersion class, like in French or German or whatever.
It's
just like
you start talking the other language.
Yeah, and so I think that the first thing I would do is I would be very cautious about underestimating the person's capacity to understand. And I would say they have the capacity to understand all of this stuff. It's a matter of how can I, most effectively make this accessible. And I would also remember that a lot of times people who don't have any disabilities have trouble understanding this stuff too. And so it's like, well, how can I'd have to know kind of the person, I guess, and specifically what the subject matter was that was going to be conveyed. But there's a way to do it. That's where I would start off with. I would start off with the conviction that there's a way to do it, and I would say, okay, what's the essential thing that we're trying to get across to this person right now? What's the essential element? What's the important thing? What is the takeaway that you would like for this person kind of to come away with first? And then what we can do is, because there's so many things to talk about, we go off on these videos and explore all these different, largely because we want to give people a sense for how expansive all this stuff is. But if you can hone in on one topic and you can say that thing in 5 or 10 or 15 different ways, and you can give 2 or 3 illustrations for each of the ways that you say it, it'll start to make sense to that person to the degree that you kind of reference the person's personal experience. Do you remember when you were feeling that and then suddenly you didn't feel that way anymore? Have you ever been doing something and not known that you were doing it? You know what I'm saying? Have you ever say, I don't know, sometimes a person's absent-mindedly tapping their hand or something like that and it's bothering you, and you tell them to stop, and then they are aware of it. It's like, there's things that you do in your head that are like that too. You can think thoughts without knowing it. It's possible to be doing things and not realize it. Those are just some things that kind of came to mind.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're working on that video for you, so hopefully you can get that to him and it will help connect some dots. But I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. So thank you guys again for being here, and we will see you again very soon.
Thanks. Good night.